Caroline's got her own hype team. Yes, gang, that is the energy we are bringing tonight. Hello, it should just be on. Should we just do a wee mic check? Can everyone hear us? Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then anyone online, just give us a wee shout in the chat if you have any issues hearing us. Good evening. My name is Myri. I run Lighthouse, Edinburgh's Radical Bookshop, and I have had such an incredible journey through this wonderful book, Single and Psycho by Caroline Young. I'm going to read your bio so that people know where the roots of this book are, and then I'm going to say a few words about the book, and then it will be Caroline's turn to introduce the book in her own words. And then I have a million questions because this book has so much in it, but I will leave time for you guys. So if you have your thinking caps on, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them at the end. That includes you lovely people online. And then afterwards we'll have a signing next door. So, to start, Caroline Young is a freelance writer and author from Edinburgh, specialising in fashion, pop culture and classic cinema. She is the author of several books, including The It Girls, Glamour, Celebrity and Scandal, Hitchcock's Heroines and Crazy Old Ladies, The Story of Hag Horror, which was nominated for both the Rondo Hatton Award and the Richard Warren Memorial. And today is the official publication day of Single and Psycho. Will you put your hands together for Caroline? Grab my scribbled notes that I can absolutely read. I feel like, so the book itself comes in this moment where the best-selling genre is romance fiction in the UK, and like the fastest growing genre of fiction, and more women are also simultaneously opting out of marriage, and specifically heterosexual marriage. So we live in a world of dichotomies and these conflicts, and here you have a book that is so full of nuance, that is so full of looking at those conflicts and clashes, and it is so full of reference for how we have ended up in the kind of world where those two things might be true. So could you start us off by telling us a little bit about your elevator pitch for the book, and then how it came to exist in the world?
Okay, so it is a history of psychotic single women in pop culture, taking the reader through from the 19th century to today, with films including Fatal Attraction, Promising Young Woman, and it's looking at the evolution of how we perceive single women and why they're psychotic, not why they're psychotic, why they're considered to be psychotic. But I also weave in my own experiences because it was really sort of rooted in my own kind of disappointments and love, I suppose, and some of the trauma, and I guess why I empathise with these women as well. So.
It's a very vulnerable book because, as you say, there is a lot of you in it, but also we live in a world that has shamed the single woman, and to sort of portray that like sense that you might recognise yourself in these vilified women is a really bold move, and I think really makes the book come alive. You kind of go Dickens to Baby Reindeer. Yeah. Like there's everything in this book, and so can you take us to the beginning? Mm-hmm. And the chapter headings in this are so great. I'm just going to pick out some of my favourites. I'm not going to be ignored. The Mad Woman in the Attic, Bachelor Girls. Is it really free love? Baby Booms and Working Girls, Bitches from Hell, Sex and Fear, Playboy Bunny, Slut Shaming, and the Naughties Double Standard. And then I'll Show You Crazy towards the end, which really builds. So we're going to start with kind of the Mad Women in the Attic, and can you sort of take us back in time to sort of the roots of this culture?
Yeah, so as I was researching, I thought, well, it's best to kind of go back to who was considered the kind of, I suppose, the original psychotic single woman, and it's Miss Havisham from Dickens. So I started with Dickens, and I looked at how in the 19th century women were often diagnosed with hysteria if they didn't conform to what they were supposed to, if they were I mean, there's all these memes that go around of all the sort of traits in the 19th century of what women were kind of put in insane asylums for, and so I thought that was really interesting to look at that. And as I researched this, it was really interesting that there was at various points in history there are times when there are considered surplus single women, and some of the plans in the 19th century were to send them to Australia, to send them to America, to kind of get rid of them, get them out of Britain, because they're not contributing anything. And I thought that was so interesting, how if a woman is single, her value is really kind of reduced. She's not seen to bring worth to anything. And I thought that was so interesting. So I looked at Jane Eyre, where there's the idea of the mad woman in the attic, and Miss Havisham, and various other examples in the 19th century. Because also that kind of gothic women's fiction, I think, is really sort of really has an impact on horror movies as well. So I thought that's interesting to go back then to look at that influence and how that's influenced movies now, and horror movies now.
Yeah, you have such a sense of the echoes as you read the book of like, oh, that's where that archetype comes from.
Right, yeah.
And also just how basic it is that we keep reusing a lot of that stuff in popular culture. A little bit later on, you have, I think you have a line in it where you say like, there's so much in branding, and the Bachelor Girls was this rebranding of the pathetic single woman. Can you talk about like how that moment came to be?
Yeah, the idea of the Bachelor Girl is really cool, actually. So in the late 19th century, early 20th century, there was the Bachelor Girl was the single woman, but she was kind of living independently. She was working. She was going around on her bicycle, and she was wearing clothing that was less restricted, and she was actually celebrated. There was a lot of feminist writers at the time, obviously the suffragette movement, and so it was this idea of reclaiming singleness, but again, it kind of then got pushed back. I guess there was then with the First World War, there was then the sense of independence as well. But there was also this kind of the messaging that always infiltrates is that if a woman is single or choosing not to have children, there's something wrong with her, and it's kind of rooted, I suppose, in homophobia a little bit, because it's the accusation that she's a lesbian or frigid, and there's all these kind of terms that fly at her, and it was so interesting that kind of, for a few years, that sense of freedom and that celebration is then kind of twisted a little bit.
I found, for someone who reads quite a lot of queer history, there's a moment where you talk about where they're almost about to make lesbianism illegal, and then the Lords push it back because they're like, no, if we do that, people will discover this really glamorous lifestyle.
You'll give them ideas if you
can't let the word get out there. This is out there.
Yeah.
By making it illegal.
Yeah.
And I think there's this push and pull over and over again through the book. These moments of like, there's war, then you have the surplus woman, or there's women progress in a particular direction, and then there's the fear backlash. Can you talk about some of your favorite films, if we're going back, so bridging those two, if we're looking at like 1940s, 50s, pre-next feminist wave, like how that played out? Yeah,
so when we think of films in the 1930s, it's often the female characters, Katharine Hepburn, Joan Crawford, or these kind of working women, independent, really fabulous characters. They did kind of find love at the end, it wasn't like, that was kind of the overarching message, but there was that real sense of independence. And then in the 1940s, there's kind of, with the Second World War, there's this idea of the Gothic woman's picture, which is all about the sort of anxiety, I suppose, that women were feeling at the time. But there was also the spinster, and so the character, like, have you seen Now Voyager? Betty Davis in Now Voyager is this really kind of like, she's got an older mother, so that's obviously a bad sign. Her mother was in her 40s when she had her, so that's obviously going to impact her. So she's all frumpy, and her eyebrows are but she gets made over, and so she gets changed into this beautiful woman who finds love. But there is a twist in that it's not quite the love that she wanted, and that she can't marry the person for various reasons. So I think that was interesting, because in the Second World War, people were sacrificing things. Women were sacrificing because their loved ones were going off and possibly dying overseas. And then after the war, when men came back, then film noir came to be, and the femme fatale, and she was, slinking around, and she was tempting men, and she was being very duplicitous, and that was kind of based on this idea that what were women getting up to when men were away? They were up to all sorts of bad things, and that was reflected in that character, the femme fatale. So yeah, and then the 50s. Then everything kind of retreats, it's like women should be going back into the workplace, and all the movies kind of reflect that as well. So yeah, so it's just so interesting when you watch movies, you can see the social history there.
But also you see, and then as you go forward, that interplay between women who were on the screen and their lives off screen.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Not to bring in Marilyn Monroe, but
yeah, right.
You do
yeah
so beautifully explore that tension of what it is to play out those things on screen, and then who the women were off screen.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting that women like Betty Davis or Joan Crawford or whatever, they were very, really quite tough women. They survived in tough industry. They were, reached the top of their game. They were making millions for the studios, but they also were always reported as being very unlucky in love, or flitting through marriages, or mistreating their children, and all those kind of things. And Marilyn Monroe in particular was really treated as this kind of tragic case. She did get married, but she was divorced as well. And by the time of her death, she was 36. That was considered, past it. She was really kind of getting too old. She was seen to have psychological problems. She that was very well documented, and unlucky in love. And one of the headlines after she died was that she was alone on a Saturday night, and it was the worst fate. She died alone on a Saturday night, which was typically date night. So
I think if we bring that sense of the way the book does what's on the page and off the page, can you maybe take us through your story that then is mapped out on the journey of the book, and then we'll come back to the next era of film.
Okay. So it's kind of a memoir. I'd gone through a few traumatic things, and when I wrote the book, I was really thinking about what my role was, or what my place was. I was in my early 40s. I was I really wanted children, but it just hadn't worked out. I'd had a couple of miscarriages. I lost my job. I'd had a failed round of IVF, and I was just really I started to think about how society treats women who fail at these things, or can't do these things, and I actually found comfort in watching these movies. I watched a lot of horror movies. I really Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist. I was watching all these movies, and just because I researched them for another book, and there's really this kind of female sort of, well, I suppose in Rosemary's Baby it's about the body being taken over, and in The Exorcist there's actually this kind of underlying theme of working women and a single mother. So I was watching all these kind of horror movies, and it kind of sparked some ideas. Watched Fatal Attraction, and it sparked those ideas. And then I'd had this idea that I wanted to write a memoir, just as a cathartic kind of thing. And so I combined the two basically, and it kind of took off a little bit. And I didn't quite mean to share as much as I shared in the book, but it just sort of happened. And I was trying to, just as I was researching, my mind kind of thought of things that happened in my life, and how how there was kind of mirrors and parallels to things, and
it works. I want to ask about that element of a cultural shift, maybe more in the way we consume this media than the way that it is created, but that idea of the single woman as pathetic and it being an act of humiliation, cultural humiliation, to say these women are undesirable. The hag, the spinster, all the rest of it, before age 36. And then this move to now consuming, as you say, you found comfort in that, and the catharsis of seeing represented non-utopian versions of how it all turns out. Can you talk about what it is to, that tension between consuming media that is maybe humiliating, and then reclaiming it?
Well, I think there is something comfortable about watching kind of slightly trashy things, and watching things that maybe you think, or maybe is that okay? But I don't know, even just like romantic comedies that you know are just kind of like okay. But yeah, I really writing the book, I'm not like, oh, I don't want any films to show single women in this way, because I think it's fun, and I think that you can kind of like laugh a little bit at it, and I think there's humor you can find in these kind of representations, and they're also like little time capsules as well, which is really interesting, because when you watch them, you're going back, like if you watch Fatal Attraction, you're going back to the 1980s, and it's and it's so fascinating just to see what people thought at that time, and also to see like what the reason is, why that film was happening at that time, and why was it so successful at that time, and what that reason is. And I think you can kind of learn a little bit from it, and you see the mirrors of the backlash against feminism in the 1980s, as you can see it now when you look at there's a bit of a resurgence, I think, of similar themed films now. So I think enjoying these things, I think, is also, it's okay, and I think it's cathartic, because you're like, okay, I don't know, there's something just really comforting about watching something trashy and silly, and it's a bit wrong, but it's okay.
I think there was something comforting in knowing that somebody else does that. That
Exactly.
somebody else would be like, I will watch something that is really talking shit about me.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I always should, like propaganda makes my skin crawl, but also, I want to, if we sort of skip ahead a little bit and maybe explore that idea as part of that, I think there is this. There's a new wave of horror, and there's a new wave of sort of quote unquote like feminist horror, and there is this shift, it feels, in the way these psychotic women are portrayed, which is less about their pathetic ending, even if it does end up being a violent ending, but more about revenge.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you can tell us about that dynamic, why that's different, and why you like it.
I did. So in the 2010s, there's obviously the kind of new wave of feminism, and then there was the Me Too movement, and there was actually this kind of this new way of telling stories about single women. And it's kind of the stereotype of the messy, chaotic, Fleabag character, and from Lena Dunham, and that felt very fresh at the time in the 2010s, and it was like this idea of like, okay, yeah, I'm a bit of a mess, but that's okay, I'm going to make fun of it, or I'm going to embrace it, These characters are falling around drunk, and then, losing their keys, getting locked out of their house, and like, yeah, been there, done that. So yeah, that was kind of fun. And then there was also this element of revenge, which came in. So after the Me Too movement, films like Promising Young Women, and also Killing Eve in a way as well, I think, which kind of tapped into this kind of slightly violent psychopath who's beautifully dressed, but she kills people, she doesn't care, and it's like she loves people and leaves them, and it's this idea of turning the tables a little bit, and something very cathartic about characters like that, because I think we maybe want a little bit of fantasize a little bit about revenge, or taking revenge on kind of these bad people in the world, and I think that was certainly that sense of the Me Too movement. I think that really sort of the idea of like, why should women have to put up with that kind of thing? They want to take revenge, and
you talk about in the book, so there are also, you talk about blaxploitation, and you talk about lots of different kinds of, I mean, it's a book that's anchored in Western culture.
It is, yeah.
It's a book that's anchored in the kind of racism and misogyny and homophobia that would have been in the arts generally.
Yeah.
So it's white women, or the other woman coming in. Can you talk a little bit about how you saw that play out in these types of media?
Yeah, so I mean, it is grounded in this white woman's experience, really, because partly I grew up in the 90s watching these movies, and it was basically white straight women was kind of like what I was consuming, and so I felt that looking for representation, I think, is not always there in those kind of films. But in terms of the psychotic single woman, there's this idea of there's lots of, so for example, I mentioned that there's a really interesting argument about the alien queen in Aliens being this kind of like other. And so Ripley is kind of the the white woman. She's got her child. So in Alien, she adopts this child and she becomes a unit. But what's the alien queen? She's like the other. And so I read a really interesting theory on that. In that that was kind of the way that women who weren't white were depicted in America at the time, or not even America, in Britain. So I think this idea of non-white women are often like the femme fatale, but they're seen as exotic, they're mysterious, but they're never quite given that sort of main character thing as well, apart from in blaxploitation, which really kind of were like these strong women in the 1970s who were kind of taking revenge on bad men, and going after the
Queen
kids.
Latifah.
Exactly. Yeah. But that was all very sort of underground. So yeah, it wasn't going into the mainstream at all. So yeah, there was a real lack of sort of representation in the mainstream.
Do you see that shifting?
A little bit, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think a little bit. But again, I think still, I think there's still probably a lot of ways to go. And I think also in terms of non-straight people as well, I think absolutely. I think that's obviously we know that that's kind of not really, that's sort of retreating a little bit. So yeah.
So there's so much in this book, and I think it's so impressive the way you manage to leverage across time zones this sort of coherent chronological narrative, which I'm absolutely not doing with this event, so my bad. The book is a lot more coherent.
Probably it's more coherent than what my answers are.
But I wonder, so I'm just going to pick out some things that like I loved, and I'm going to be like, you talk about this so well in the book. Can you talk about Thelma and Louise?
Yes.
Yes. Tell us about Thelma and Louise.
Well, so yeah, I saw that film when I was 12, and I just loved it. My best friend and I, we really liked movies, and she got the videotape, so came round to mine and we watched it. And I don't think I'd ever seen anything like that. And I just remember having this real sense of like, these were our characters. I think, and I read Gina Davis's biography memoir, and she said that when she made the film, she really felt that women didn't have those kind of characters that you root for, that you really like want to punch the air and have that moment, when you see them doing things. And Thelma and Louise was really that movie. And I think I was about 12 or 13, and so I didn't have the concept really of what sexism was, but I did know, because I remember saying that to my friend. I said, wow, this is like the opposite of sexist. And it really felt like thrilling. So yeah, that film was, it really was impactful on me. And I didn't realise that when it came out, though, that it caused this huge sort of controversy in America, where people were condemning it for encouraging women to do all sorts of bad things. And there was this real kind of drive to sort of condemn it in a way, which is crazy, because it's not that bad. I mean, it's funny to think that people get so upset about things like that. And you're like, okay, it's just a film, it's okay.
But also it provides that context for today. It's like people have always got pissed off about that pushback, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And there's that push and pull of culture, always pushing the envelope in various ways.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I found remarkable in the way you approach the book is that a lot of the reason that women are portrayed as psycho is patriarchy and sexism.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the reason that they are tipped into that in media is like shitty behavior by men, which isn't even portrayed as not shitty. It's just like, but she's insane.
Right. Yeah.
And yet it's not a man-bashing book. It's not sort of saying men are one-dimensional. It's like, here's this one-dimensional female that we're going to unpack. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you see the men evolving over time in this portrayal of like the counterpart to the single woman, how they've evolved.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I definitely didn't want to do it as a sort of man-bashing book, because I think, life's a lot more complicated than just saying, okay, they do crap things and they're bad, it's not quite. I think there's a lot of pressure.
Some of them are really bad.
There's a lot of pressure there, I think, sometimes on having to sort of conform to expectations. I think men feel that, and I think they felt that over time as well. And I think there's often confusing things that are being sent out, and what their place in the world is. And I think after the Second World War, it would have been very confusing having, being overseas, gone through so much trauma, coming back home. And it's like, what's my place in the world? What am I expected to do? Why have these women got my job? That kind of thing. What am I supposed to do about it? And I think there is a lot of pressure, and I think it doesn't help by these figures like, Andrew Tate or whatever, who are really kind of rotting the brains a little bit of boys, and telling the kind of saying that you can't be friends with women. And I think that's such a shame, because I think I've always had like really great male friends, and I think it seems such a shame to kind of create this sense that women are not worth respecting, and you're supposed to get things out of them, and if you don't get things out of them, then you're not worth it, and and if they don't give you what you want, then they're not worth it, and all these kind of messages, and I think it's a real shame, and I think I think to try and nurture them to think that it's okay that you can be friends with women, and it's okay that you don't have to live up to these kind of expectations. So hopefully, and I think people do crap things, and I do feel but I have sympathy as well. So.
Yeah, you have some great little friends that are rooting for you in this. I wonder about that. Connected to that, there is this element of we are shifting into a moment where some of the weaponization of this idea of being single as failure that has been so focused on women as a way of making sure that they did get married and they did have children, which is now making its grand comeback with the trad wife stuff, is also having a very distinct impact on a younger generation of boys coming up who are being sold this same idea that being single is pathetic. And so I wonder about whether or not that's been like a deliberate addition, or it's just like, this is what we've put into the culture. We just keep portraying the person who ends up alone as pathetic and a failure. Or, can you unpack that idea a little bit?
Well, I suppose you have to really paint the picture of the single women being failures, because if you have too many single women doing their own thing, then it's going to make people feel a bit bad about themselves. I don't know. I think it's this idea you have to kind of there's all these kind of messages at the moment about how the fertility rate is dropping, and which I was a bit confused about at first, because I thought there was too many people in the world, but apparently not. So apparently, I mean, I get some of the arguments that you need enough people to work to pay for pensions and things like that, but I think so. It's this retreat. So if women get too much power, or they get too many rights or too much freedom, I think there's that pushback from kind of a certain conservative man who maybe feels threatened by that for some reason. It's like, well, we're losing our. I suppose it's this idea of being in power. You have to maintain the power level. So if you let that drop, then what are you going to do? You've got to kind of maintain that. So you have to keep women in their place. So they don't get too powerful. And I think also there's an insecurity there. So
there's an interesting dynamic there of making it, encouraging a next generation of men who might have picked up some feminist ideas from the women raising them to re-inculcate them into this thing of you also need to police the women.
And I think it's creating a really sort of confusing, terrible. I think it's the idea that they have to live up to something as well. This notion of masculinity that they don't need to, and it just seems,
But one of the things I found really grounding in the book is that sense of how historical those waves are, of how we over and over again have moments where culture is responding to these things that happen off screen, these realities. So if I can take you, what era have I missed? We have not talked about the 90s.
We've not done the 90s, no.
We've not done the 90s. Can you tell us about the 90s?
Yeah, wow, so the 90s, that was the era that I grew up in, so I do love the 90s, I'm going to be honest. I look back at it, there was a lot of love there. So I go back to Fatal Attraction, because that was 1987, and that was really considered a kind of backlash against feminism, which is obviously the feminism in the 1970s. By the 1980s, people felt that the job had been done, and there was this real sense that women were now miserable because they'd been told that they didn't need to go off and have babies or get married. They could work and be the career woman. And then suddenly in the 1980s, there was this kind of anxiety that, oh no, I've left it too late. There's the Roy Lichtenstein image. I forgot to have a baby. So Fatal Attraction was really born from that insecurity, and it kind of fed, or it took from that insecurity really, this fear that I've left it too late. She's 36, it's her last chance, she says, and and I think people really did feel that, and there was all this stuff about, there was a famous article where apparently it was a stat that women had more chance of dying in a terrorist attack over the age of 40 than they did to get married, which turned out to be a load of nonsense. Someone just made it up for fun, but it really got ground, and people actually believed that, and it was mentioned in Sleepless in Seattle as a little joke as well. but yeah, so there was that kind of after effect for the 1990s, really. There was also this sense of the home being invaded as well, I think. So a lot of the movies, they're kind of these domestic thrillers, Hand That Was the Cradle, Single White Female, where people feel a bit threatened in their own home. There's kind of this pushback against feminism. There's often, when you watch films, they have like 1950s soundtracks. I noticed this actually. A lot of films in the late 80s, early 90s, they went back to the 50s and 60s. It's almost like this real sense of nostalgia.
Right.
And there's also the kind of more not quite so stereotypical families. So people are having all different types of families, and this caused a bit of consternation as well. You know, you've got single mothers, you've got like blended families. You've got all sorts of different families that really alternative lifestyles is what one of the conservatives described it as. So yeah, I think that created this fear, a little bit, of people who didn't quite conform coming into the home and invading the sanctity of that sort of perfect family, the perfect home. So
it's such an interesting counterpart, that thing of like the woman in the office who's going to steal your husband,
right,
to the woman who comes into your home, like
the nanny.
The nanny.
Yeah, well that's
poor
also,
babysitter.
I know.
Such a bad.
Yeah, because that was actually also, so that was the message, that you shouldn't hire someone to look after your own children. You should do your own childcare. So again, it was like, well, women shouldn't really be going out and working because you should be staying at home, because this is what happens. You get somebody coming in and trying to take your child. So yeah.
So your home, your husband, your
Yeah,
family.
exactly.
Oh my God, other women are the worst. Which is this other theme in the book is always that sense of competition,
Mm-hmm.
that women are pitted against each other instead of against circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you can explore, or maybe like pull out like a cultural moment or a movie where that exemplifies that for you.
So the one that came to mind was actually the film with Beyoncé and Ali Larter, Obsession. I've gone. Is it Obsession or is it Obsessed? I think Obsession. No, it's Obsessed. Anyway, so that is one of the sort of examples of two women fighting for this man, and I think that is kind of, it's also the idea of fatal attraction as well. So fatal attraction really inspired just a whole load of different mishmashes of that kind of theme of two women pitted against each other for the sake of one sort of very average kind of man fighting over. But yeah, and also there was that kind of race element with Beyoncé and Ali Larter, because she was tall and blonde. Beyoncé was kind of seen to be kicking her ass and that kind of thing, and that's an interesting one, because that then plays into Beyoncé's Lemonade album, where she is kind of the talking about Becky with the good hair and everything. So I find that quite an interesting dynamic. But yeah, so I've gone off track with the question.
No, that was exactly the track.
Okay.
I'm going to do a time check, because I could literally talk to you for hours. In 5 minutes, I will hand over to you. Can we talk about Bridget Jones?
Yes.
Bridget Jones and Carrie Bradshaw, who appear in a similar cultural moment.
Yeah.
And what are they doing to our brains by them?
Well, I mean, I do like Bridget Jones, because I've always I got nicknamed Bridget Jones so by somebody, so as a bit of a joke. So yeah, and I do, because I've always
Because of the hapless love life.
That, and also just being accident prone, and just I have gone around with my skirt tucked into my tights, and I just do very silly things sometimes, and so yeah, I am a bit accident prone. So yeah, I really like Bridget Jones. At the same time, I think I found her maybe a little bit more annoying when I was in my 20s when the film came out. I think it's maybe I've appreciated her a bit more. Carrie Bradshaw, again, I watched, to research the book, I watched all the episodes of Sex and the City, and I was like, she's kind of annoying actually, which I think is a general consensus at the moment. But yeah, and I think she really kind of tapped into this idea of being the fun single woman of the early 2000s, which, yeah, I think there was like a kind of contradiction between the messages of being single and Sex and the City, going to New York, drinking lots of Cosmos, buying lots of shoes. That idea of being obsessed with shoes kind of annoyed me as well. I always found that slightly irritating. And yeah, but at the same time,
tied up in a materialism, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there was another so in one episode I found particularly annoying, they go on an Amtrak journey across America, but they just can't, they're like just not liking it. And I'm like, well, how do you not like an overnight train journey? I don't understand it. So because they're just like, oh no, you're really uncomfortable. And
if you've got no man in your life, you can fill
yeah.
the hole with shoes.
Oh yeah, and then Samantha just goes and tries to flirt with all the men on the train, and
But it is that thing of like, where are female friendships or what?
Yes, so that was a good message where this idea that yes, you should find your belonging with female friends, which is great. They did all partner up towards the end, but I think it was a really sort of positive message. But at the same time, there was also this kind of like raunchification as well. This kind of that idea of porn stars and celebrating kind of Playboy and putting expectations on women that they have to be a certain thing. So they can embrace the Sex and the City lifestyle, but there's also this kind of like, I don't know, this kind of, you have to be up for it, or you've got to be this certain personality. I don't know, like a weird sort of contradiction of encouraging women that they might, you have to, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you kind of just embracing, you should be like out sleeping with lots of men, otherwise something's wrong with you. But then if you do that, then it's like, oh, you're a slut. So it's that contradiction, I think, and that was really prevalent in that time.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it plays out on screen and then in the real world in ways that are sort of punished or vilified or glamorized in different ways. And it's like, who are we? Yes, we want all the women to go out and be up for it, but simultaneously know that if you do, we will take you off the shelf. You are damaged goods now.
Yeah, and I think, I was in my early 20s and I did find it really confusing, I think, that idea that I was supposed to be, like, you're supposed to be this really sexual being, but you're not quite doing it right, or it was just really, it was really weird. I remember that.
Well, simultaneously being, like, going back to looking at some of I was never a Sex and the City person, but I got sent an episode where it's just like, a threesome is portrayed as the ultimate kink.
Right.
Like, and it's just like, it was of its time. And I think one of the things in the book that you capture so well is how media is of its time, and there's such a joy and appreciation in going back to some of these and seeing them for what they were at the time, and also what they teach us about those snapshots in time. But you also have loads of like incredible single women that we forget because they're not glamorized in society, the real women.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the suffragettes and like Susan B. Anthony. And can you tell us about like that flip side, like off screen, that encounter with the single woman?
Yeah, I mean, well, as in the 19th century, there's so many amazing single women, and there was the cult of female blessedness.
Yes, I remember this was what I was reaching for. Was it the
cult of female single
blessedness?
Single blessedness, where it was kind of an unofficial group of just women who were really achieving things as single women, and a lot of great writers. Jane Austen didn't want to get married, and Louisa May Alcott also didn't want to, because they didn't want to get. They knew that if they got married, they would have to stop writing, and I think that's really quite sad. That thought that if you get married, you have to stop doing something you really like, which just seems so like sad. And so they were like, no, I don't want to, and they created all this amazing works, and there was nursing as well, and just all these women that maybe we don't think of, who were single, and they chose to be single because of that reason, because they knew there was so much more in life they wanted to do.
I think also in the book there's this sense of like, I think we think of that culturally as, well, back in the day, if you got married then your career was done, or X, Y, Z. But what carries through the book is still how, you capture so well how the domestic space gets swallowed up by the men in your life. And that in singledom, in the 21st, in 2024, 23, being able to go away on your own and be able to write on your own is this gift that you need to give yourself to be able to claim that space.
So I went to a writing retreat. I go every so often, and there's so many brilliant women there, and they go there to get their own space. And it's not just single women, it's women who have children or are married. They go off and they go there because they get time to themselves, and it really made me think, why is it women who go? It's because we kind of lose some of our space. So when I lived with people, I found that I've kind of had to squeeze myself into, like, my space gets taken away from me. And it's even things like just putting your yoga mat down in front of the telly to do some exercise. It's like, oh no, are you watching something? Sorry, I can't put my yoga mat there. And I just think we always like...
In your own home.
And exactly, and in the flat that I owned, I still kind of did all this, like made room for someone else, and it's kind of annoying that I do that, but I just, you just...
But it's so
easy life.
conditioned.
You just like, mustn't make a fuss, don't want to have an argument, I just kind of... It's also this idea that this person can shout louder than me as well, and that kind of, they have the stronger voice, they think they're right, and so they just kind of like, you end up shriveling and making kind of, taking yourself away from that space. So.
I think there's a lot of grace that you give the single women or the women in relationships who have made themselves smaller by giving this, it's like hundreds of years of conditioning. It's baked into our social DNA to do, and then we get to see it on big screen the way we do today. I think you did it brilliantly. There's so many amazing nuggets in this. And you do get like Bake Off and the Tudors in one book. Do you have questions? Like, pull on any thread or era or piece of interest. Yes, go for it, up at the back. I will repeat the question in brief, so go for it.
The word psycho is weaponized quite a lot. And I wondered how you kind of approach that word, because psycho has become shorthand for dangerous, violent, and unreasonable, and quite gendered, when, psychotic, the word, isn't necessarily a horror film term. It doesn't mean serial killer. It means somebody who's very ill, someone who's very unwell, someone who could possibly hurt themselves. And I wonder whether that ableism feeds into some of the stereotypes, and how that's approached, how you approach that, what you think about the term psycho and psychotic.
That is such a great question. For the people online who might not have heard, and anyone up at the front, a question around how you navigated psychotic and like the idea of the psycho woman and the ableism in the way that we will vilify what is often a mental health condition, or we've created a cultural figure out of that.
So the term, so when I use it in the title, it's kind of, I suppose it's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but it's also kind of using in a way that this is basically a word that is weaponized against single women. They're kind of described as psycho, when there's no like actual acknowledgement of what the word actually means. And also when we look at films as well, like Fatal Attraction or what, was a Cradle, these women are just painted in such broad brushstrokes that there's never any sort of attempt to kind of work out what they could be diagnosed with, what is kind of, is there something wrong, like what's the issue there? Because if you've watched The Hand That Watched the Cradle, there was real issues there, but there's no sort of, she's just psycho, that's kind of the word that's used. So so I suppose so I was trying to kind of claim it back a little bit, and also just think about how that is used against women. I think sometimes I was thinking about how, like, when you hear maybe some people talk about, my ex-wife, what a psycho, or whatever, and I sort of think in my head, really, like, I wonder what you did actually, because the way that they use that word, it's sort of like a way just to kind of dismiss their bad actions, but lay it on their ex or on this woman who apparently wronged them, and it's like, I don't think it's that. But and then they often use the psycho film, the soundtrack to the Sotman, do a little knife imitation and stuff like that. And so the psycho film, that is kind of where that came from, and then it's just really kind of taken off. So hopefully I handled it in a kind of sensitive way, but I did try to kind of say that yes, it has been weaponized, and I think sometimes though, I think we can kind of use it tongue in cheek and kind of just take ownership of it.
Yeah. I think there's also moments in the book where you surface real traumas that are sort of not even plot points. They're just sort of in the story, and we're almost not supposed to notice them, whether it's miscarriages or past abuse or that desperately wanting to have a child, or a desperate kind of loneliness, and a like mental unraveling that is sort of, you resurface the fact that like it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in a vacuum.
No, exactly. Yeah. So I think just going back to Fatal Attraction, I think it's really interesting that Alex says that when she tells Dan she's pregnant, she said, I had a bad miscarriage in the past, and you sort of think, oh, that's I wonder what's going on there, and he wants her to get an abortion, and she's like, she doesn't want to because she wants this child, but she's given no support, and I feel that's really so telling about who she is, but it's never explored. Instead, that's kind of just brushed under the carpet, and she becomes this witch and this kind of like sort of very, this kind of psychotic character who's doing all this stuff for no reason, really.
Yeah, and then you look at Baby Reindeer and sort of more contemporary representations. And
yeah.
Actually, it's still garbage.
Yeah, I mean, I think Baby Reindeer, it was the way it was written. I think was really well done. But then it's so interesting that the villain in that series was not really was really the guy, and who the abuser, he was like a famous producer, wasn't he? Or was he the guy who abused the main protagonist? And then it was the woman though who became vilified. Everyone was like trying to find out who she was, and it just was such an example of like we all just love well, not we, but society just loves like this kind of unstable woman and want to punish her. So it wants to find who is this real person, so we can all kind of have a go at her online and punish her.
Yeah, to punish her is such an important go for it.
Actually, if I had viewed that, then I would need to
Sort
go
of coming off of that previous question and now talking about Baby Reindeer, I'm wondering if because Martha, the character, like is clearly mentally ill, if that marks then a significant departure from the previous Single and Psycho lot, in that they weren't actually mentally ill, or at least that's not explored, whereas it is for Martha.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to? I think now there is so much more of an awareness about mental illness and trying to get that diagnosis, and I think we see that much more in works like Baby Reindeer. I think where there is more of an attempt. I think. I mean, because they redid Fatal Attraction, and there was supposed to be this much more nuanced kind of. I wasn't a big fan of the TV series, but there was more of a nuance, trying to look at it from her point of view. What were the reasons? Trying to give her more of an understanding. So I think. I think there is an attempt, but I don't know. I think also the reaction to it, I think, is probably the same as it, but more amplified as well.
Right, that's tracks in the book as well, that element of like these movies aren't made in a vacuum, and it's how they're consumed and what people do after the film ends. That's such an important component of how they become part of pop culture.
Absolutely, and it's so interesting that this example of social media compared to in the 80s when there was obviously no social media, it was all kind of newspaper columns and people writing letters into the papers and things like that, and discussions in real life or on television shows. But now everything's just kind of online, and being able to track down that person just like that instantly.
But also there's that interesting again on and off the page. You've got Dickens at the beginning who does try to put his wife in an asylum because he wants his pretty young thing. And then you've got the way you unpack sort of Clint Eastwood and the public persona and the screen persona, and then the way he treated the women in his life, and how she was still, even in her own obituary,
seen as his bitter, jealous ex-girlfriend. So,
do we have another question? No, you must have more. Are there any online?
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
go for it.
this is from Fran. I'm curious if you get into discussions around whose labor creates these films and moments in pop culture. Just asking, as women and marginalized folks' labor behind the screen has often been largely ignored.
Do I go in? I do mention the fact that often the characters like Alex Forrest or like Catherine in Basic Instinct, whoever, would be very two-dimensional if it wasn't for the work of these actresses, who really bring a lot more to the characters than what they were really painted as. I think often these characters are written by men, the films are directed by men, and so if it wasn't for these actresses bringing that deeper understanding, Glenn Close actually created a whole sort of profile of Alex Forrest, and really trying to, I think her father was a psychiatrist, so she asked him to give some deeper insights. So she brought that to the role, but I think it's kind of, but yeah.
Do we have any more in the room? Yeah, go for it, up at the back.
There are, sort of carrying on from that, there are a lot of editors of films like this who are women. Do you think that like their experience is playing into it at all, or how they're used to create that kind of patriarchal thing? Do you know what I'm saying?
So you mean, so a lot of the editors behind the scenes were women?
The directors are the men, but the people that actually put it together afterwards are women.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that is a really good point. Yeah, I mean, they are doing the sort of the labour behind the scenes to bring the film to life. It often in sort of the 1940s, 1930s, it was women who were kind of doing all those kind of editing jobs, the script supervisor roles, and actually a lot of women writing as well behind the scenes. But yeah, they are kind of like unacknowledged. I don't really dip into this in the book, but it is a really interesting subject about that kind of behind the scenes and what power they have and how what their voice is, and yeah, they were kind of doing all the work and not really getting the recognition.
There's also an element that you explore in the book where you look at like really deeply, like highly curated public, like Taylor Swift, who are participants in their own creation of and participation in this. Use the example of the Vogue cover. With, you know, the cat drape.
Oh, the time.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah. And yet now here she is, very, you know, the fanfare around the engagement. Yeah. It is, it's interesting both in creation and the consumption how much we participate in reproducing the male gaze or these patriarchal structures.
Taylor Swift, I'm a big Swiftie, love her. But I do go into a little bit about how she created that sense of herself as the serial dater, because she always talked in interviews about the guys who dumped her via text message or whatever, and then but she kind of used her, you know, she got revenge a little bit putting them into the lyrics. But yeah, it's interesting when she's 35. And so she got engaged just before her 36th birthday, and there was a lot of, actually, I saw some stuff about that, you know, it's kind of like she got there in the nick of time, but also she just kind of, I suppose, following that kind of what's expected of her, really, but, you know, or her hard work paid off, or you know, she's sung about love, what is she going to sing about now that she's married? It's like, I don't know, but it's just funny because she's done a whole load of stuff that isn't just about, you know, relationships, but yeah. It's just interesting that it's kind of still there.
Taylor Swift, notorious hag. Does anybody else have a question? Conal Shai, yes, excellent. Whatever's easier for you.
Do you think that in the near future we are going to get better at connecting together? We're going to get better at not being, because obviously there's the whole history now of people becoming single and becoming insular, technology, yada yada yada, ChatGPT is your therapist. Do you think that there is a solution, or do you think it's going to get to the point where it's just like, well, you have the lonely female, but you also have the lonely male? Where is that going, do you think?
Yes.
Single versus lonely.
I mean, maybe people. I'm kind of like, oh, can we just get rid of social media? So, that's kind of my thought. I don't know. I think things do kind of retreat. So I think you know, we often you see these waves happening. So I think people are, you know, maybe the next generation are coming up and thinking, actually, we want to interact more. I think people do always need that in real life connection, and I think people are going to get fed up and they'll want to like seek that out again. I think these things just come in waves. I think it's playing with very new technology, and I think maybe people get tired of it. And also, if there might be crackdowns on speech and all that kind of thing, so maybe the only way to kind of like avoid that is to meet in real life. So maybe that's going to be something that's happening. So yeah.
I feel like it's interesting that your book is coming out in a moment where, in terms of like publishing culture, there's a lot more around the menopause, and there's a lot more about women choosing to be childless or child-free. And this idea of decoupling a woman's worth and value as a human being from like who they're paired up with, or a career, or that they're mothers. Because that's intrinsically linked to this idea that the single woman has no value because she's not a wife, and she cannot possibly then also be a mother.
Yeah.
And there are writers writing that, I'm thinking of like Nicole Louis, who are sort of saying we need role models and resurfacing of stories within popular culture of single women, or in the case of Nick's book, like childless women, being something that is desirable and glamorous and full of joy, and that being single does not necessarily mean being lonely. And you do surface women in the book who are for whom singledom is a beautiful, empowering thing that also doesn't preclude loads of other ways of having community and love and connection.
Yeah, and I think it's because I found this out when I went to this writing retreat, and there was single women who were my age, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to have a baby or not, and I was really at that turning point of. But then I met them, and it was so like just they're living these wonderful lives, traveling and going off and doing all sorts of cool things, and it kind of, I think if we didn't always have that pressure, I think just to accept that actually life can just be really great if you just embrace what don't feel that you have to conform. But yeah, I think like we're getting that message coming through all the time, but again there's also that niggling kind of like question. I don't know, there's always that lingering question mark that people are always being asked, are you really happy, are you sure?
Yeah. I think we are out of time. This is such a brilliant book, and it packs so much in, and we have literally just skimmed the surface. It is so rigorous, but also so human and joyful, and it has such humor about the women that you're writing about and the shitty situations. But also Caroline has this gift for like, I live under a rock and consume not much screen media other than like terrible cop shows. And the book has this great gift for like the wiki entry on a film. You just like, it's such a Rolodex of like extraordinary films to then go and like look up YouTube trailers. So even if you don't watch horror, even if you don't watch a particular genre that crops up in the book, you can see it then reflected in so many other bits of culture. I was like, oh, that's what that comes from. That's what that, And I brought up bunny boiler today at lunch, and my brother-in-law was like, what is that thing?
That's so funny that people don't know where that came from.
Hands up, who knows or would use the reference bunny boiler? Okay, cool, curious, interesting. On that note, please do take home this very brilliant book and all the nuggets of information in it. A wee reminder, we have a pay it forward system, so if you are too broke to buy the book, a past human put money behind the till so that you could go home with it. And you can come up and ask any questions you were too shy to ask and get your book signed. And there's no rush to clear out. We'll just sort of wander around and pack away chairs around you, which leaves me only to ask you to join me in thanking Caroline Young.